Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com, and today we're taking a closer look at installing and of course listening to the Magnaflow Street Series Cat-Back Exhaust, available for all 18 and newer Mustang GTs without active exhaust. You should be checking this out if you're looking for 3 out of 5 on our loudness meter, as you just heard from our sound clips. This is a great option for daily drivers looking to make a ton of noise outside without being too overwhelming like a 5 out of 5 on the loudness meter would. The Street Series here is one of the 2 options from Magnaflow. They have Street and Competition. This one here has a resonated mid-pipe that's going to help you reduce some of the drone frequencies that you get inside the cabin to make it a more pleasant driving experience. And it's also giving you a really deep and throaty tone on the outside of the vehicle. Now that deep throaty tone is one of my personal favorites. I actually think this is one of the best sounding catbacks for this Mustang. It is just a really good quality sound. Now if you're looking for something that's louder and raspy, this guy's not going to be for you. This is a deep throaty rumble, guys. At idle, it's going to have a nice rumble to it. At the low to mid range of the RPM band, it's got a pretty tame sound from red light to red light. But once you get on it, wide open throttle, it's definitely going to start to bark. It's a very versatile exhaust. Now the rest of the exhaust here is made of 304 stainless steel, highest quality materials in the category, which makes it a great option for guys located in wintry weather areas like we are here on the East Coast. We see a lot of road salt in the winter months, which can corrode exhaust materials. 304 stainless is one of the more corrosion and rust resistant, so it's a good way to pick that up if that's where you're located. The system here is 3-inch mandrel bent, which means it's going to have less kinks, less airflow restriction, gives you a nice bump in power and torque. Now this is not a resonator delete exhaust, which is worth noting. Some of the other kits out there just have an X pipe in place of the factory resonator. This replaces it with a more free-flowing resonator, but something worth noting. Now this kit's gonna come in right around $1,650, so it's right on par with the rest of the top quality brands in the category as far as non-active exhaust is concerned. It's worth noting right out of the box, Magnaflow does include pre-installed active exhaust valves in place on the muffler. They also include in the kit non-active exhaust valve deletes, which we'll have to install later on in the video, and I'll show you guys exactly what that process looks like. But don't be afraid if you open up the box and you see the active in there, the non-active exhaust pipe is there too. Now when it comes to the install, I'm gonna give it 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. You can tackle this in the driveway at home with about 2, maybe 3 hours from start to finish. You'll need the jack and jack stands, of course, or a lift if you have access to one. It definitely makes life easier. Now simple hand tools will get the job done. I'm gonna walk you through every single step of the process. What do you say? I shut up and we get started. Tools used in this install include an impact gun or a ratchet, extension, 10, 13, and 15 millimeter deep sockets, WD-40 is recommended or something similar, and a mallet. All right guys, once you have your Mustang up in the air and supported properly, whether it be on jack stands or on a lift like we have here, you want to grab an impact gun or a ratchet and a 15 millimeter deep socket, and we're going to loosen up the 2 band clamps holding on your factory catback to the catalytic converter pipes. Now you'll see that right in front of the factory resonator. There's 2 nuts here and 2 nuts there. You don't have to completely remove them, just get them nice and loose. All right, the next step, we're gonna move back toward the rear of our vehicle, right under the rear subframe. Now, if you look at your rear sway bar, straight past them are 2 hangers where your exhaust is hooked on and bolted to that subframe using 2 13 millimeter bolts. From here, instead of trying to slide our hangers out of the isolators, I'm actually just gonna completely unbolt the isolators to make life a lot easier. So grab an extension and a 13 millimeter deep socket, and what I like to do is go straight over the sway bar and remove those 2 bolts. All right, now what I like to do after the bolts are removed is we have to unclip the isolator from the frame. They're still hooked in there. So what you're basically gonna do is lift up on them so they disconnect and rotate them down and out of the way. All right, our next step here is to get our entire factory catback off of the vehicle. We're gonna start up here with our resonator. Right in front of those, I'm gonna tap out the factory band clamps. I got my buddy Stan helping me get this thing down. If you're working on the ground, you may be able to do it by yourself, but if you're in the air, you might want a helping hand. All right, so now we should slide them out of the hangers at the tips, and it should come free. All right, so we got our factory catback off of our 19 GT, and it's on the ground here next to our Magnaflow Catback. Now, I want to take you through some similarities and differences between the two kits, and I want to start up front here. Now, typically in an exhaust, you would get something like an X pipe or an H pipe. With your Magnaflow here, you do actually have a resonator, so that is very similar to the factory option. The only difference here is that the Magnaflow resonator is going to be a lot more free-flowing. Your factory resonator is pretty restrictive in both volume, tone, and power. The Magnaflow one is going to help lower some of those higher frequencies to reduce drone to give you a better in-car experience. It is going to be a nice free-flowing option to give you a bump in power. The rest of your kit here is a 3-inch mandrel bent 304 stainless steel. So 3-inch is a little bit larger than your factory catback, which is around 2 3/4. And the mandrel bend is basically a kink-free bend. The bends here are a lot smoother to reduce some airflow restriction that you'd get with a factory system. 304 stainless means it is the highest quality in the category here. It is going to be a lot more corrosion and rust resistant than aluminized steel or even 409 stainless, and it's going to be more corrosion resistant than your factory option. Your mufflers here are going to be the Magnaflow Streets, which provide some of that sound you heard from the sound clip. They're a lot more free-flowing than your factory mufflers, which are a lot bigger, which is worth noting. The Magnaflow Streets are going to keep that volume at a nice, crisp, clear tone, while also letting airflow pass through without restricting it as much. Now, one thing really worth noting here is out of the box, the Magnaflow Street Cat-Back is equipped with the active exhaust valve. Now that also comes with the non-active exhaust valve delete. So you are going to have to swap that out. It's not that difficult. There's 2 clamps holding on this active exhaust bracket. We're gonna use our socket and impact gun to remove that. We'll swap it out for this. So for our non-active exhaust guys, you're gonna wanna swap these. They are included in the kit, so that's worth noting. Finally, your tips. Your tips are gonna be a lot more aggressive than the factory ones, which are thin slash cut around 3 inches. Your new Magnaflows are 4.5 inches, slash cut, double walled, polished stainless steel. The polished finish is gonna help it reduce discoloration, so it'll stay bright and shiny for years to come. The rest of your exhaust, under that excruciating heat of the exhaust gas, will start to change a little bit of color, which is absolutely normal, but your tips will stay the same. These guys do look really good coming out the rear end. There are some black options or other color options in the category. I personally like the way these guys look. Now we do have to transfer over the factory hangers to the new exhaust and of course swap out those valves that I just talked about. So what do you say we get started? All right, now when it comes to taking the factory hangers off, it may be easier to lubricate it with WD-40 in the middle. It'll help it slide off a little easier. Basically just gonna twist them and pull them straight back. All right, so when you're swapping these over, you wanna make sure you're taking note of this tab at the top. That's what hooks into the subframe, so you want that facing your subframe or the front of the vehicle. So we're gonna slide these guys right on. And I'm just gonna rotate them down and out of the way. Next, what we're gonna do is focus on swapping out the active exhaust valves for the non-active exhaust adapter. So what we're gonna do is flip this muffler over so we can gain access to the clamps. There's 2 of them here. Grab your 10mm socket and we're gonna loosen these guys up. All right, so basically what we're doing is loosening this up enough to remove it from that slot. Now we can just take it all apart just like that. I'm actually just gonna prop this guy off to the side and do the same thing for the other one. All right. So with those guys off, what we're doing now is essentially just pulling out the active exhaust valve. The non-active one slides right into place here, and we're basically just putting the clamps back on. You can see they kind of slot together like this. The clamps go right around that. Bring the stud back in and put the nut back on top. Just like that. Same thing on the other one. All right, with those guys in place, just make sure everything is straight. Grab your 10mm socket and tighten it down. So now I'm gonna flip this guy back over. And as you can see, it's a non-active exhaust now. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, first step for the install, take your factory band clamps. Take a note of that little open slot on one end where this tab is. That's gonna line up to the welded on button on your factory cat pipes. So we're gonna slide that guy in. Basically, lets us know where it needs to be positioned. All right, now we can grab our X pipe from Magnaflow and get to installing it. Next, we're gonna install our mid pipe. Now, when you do this, you wanna slide this into those factory band clamps. On the opposite end, you'll notice one pipe is longer than the other. The longer pipe is gonna be on your passenger side, shorter guy on your driver. All right, at this point, what you can do is take your 15mm deep socket. We're gonna lift up on this mid pipe and tighten down these clamps. Next up, we're gonna install our hanger pipe that's gonna connect to our subframe. Make sure you have a clamp over the end. I'm gonna insert this over the passenger side pipe on our mid pipe. All right, once you have that seated all the way in, let's connect that hanger. All right, so I'm gonna rotate this guy up, and if you remember, it clamps right on in there. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. All right, next up, we're gonna take our 13mm factory bolts and put them back into the subframe. As you can see, one of our hangers is pretty cocked off to the side, so we have to pull down on that to make sure it aligns. So that's why we wanna do this now. All right, so now we're gonna grab our 13mm socket and our extension, go over the sway bar and tighten them down. All right, next up, grab your 15 socket again, and we're gonna tighten up these clamps. Now, I don't like to get them too tight. You wanna leave a little bit of room for adjustment until the very end, so I'm just gonna get them nice and snug. All right, next up, we're gonna do our passenger side muffler. You wanna make sure you have a clamp over the pipe side, slide your hanger into the isolator first, and then we'll meet back up with the piping. I'm gonna use a mallet here to just finish off the job and tap this guy into place. There we go. Rotate your clamp into position and get it nice and snug again. All right, same thing on the other side. There we go, didn't even need a mallet for that side. Grab your socket and tighten down the clamp. Now that you have this in place, what you're gonna do is rotate the tips into place, make sure they're aligned properly, head back and tighten down all your clamps, and you're good to go. That's gonna wrap up my review and install for the Magnaflow Street Series Cat-Back Exhaust, fitting all 2018 and newer Mustang GTs without active exhaust. Really high quality stuff here from Magnaflow. If you wanna pick it up for yourself, you can do so right here at AmericanMuscle.com.